I was working as an IT support technician for a mid-sized legal firm. The pay was good, the job was steady, and the work was manageable. The only real headache was my manager, who we'll call Gary, was textbook corporate petty. He wasn't technically skilled, but he loved power and structure. He ran the IT department less like a technical team and more like a high school detention hall. He was the type who would give everyone a lecture about leaving a single paperclip on their desk, but would also leave coffee stains all over his own keyboard. Total hypocrite. My job involved a lot of external client site visits. I managed the network installations and equipment for our biggest clients, which meant I was constantly driving across the city one month. Gary got a stick up his rear end about expense reports. My team's mileage reimbursement was always accurate, but he decided to introduce a new, completely absurd rule. He sent a company-wide email that read, "All field technicians must be clocked in and actively working during all travel periods. No uncompensated or prep time will be permitted." It sounds fair, right? But he clarified it in a meeting, staring directly at me, the fastest tech. Every minute spent driving or sitting in your car must have a measurable, billable task associated with it. If we couldn't prove we were actively doing something for a client in transit, like a mandatory phone call or documentation review, the time would be deducted. This was clearly aimed at forcing us to work off the clock or, at best, slowing us down to avoid paying us properly for travel time. My immediate thought was, this is absolutely ridiculous and probably illegal. But instead of arguing, I decided to focus on the phrase, "Every minute spent driving must have a measurable, billable task." I realized that the primary thing that stops a field tech from doing administrative tasks while driving is, well, driving. It's unsafe, illegal, and definitely frowned upon. But Gary hadn't made an exception for safety. He had made a mandate for efficiency. He literally mandated that we must be productive every single minute we were sitting in the company car. My solution was simple, legal, and beautiful. I would stop driving until the documentation was complete. The firm used specialized time-tracking software for billing clients. For every client visit, we had to submit about 20 minutes of post-visit documentation, summarizing the fix and next steps. Under the old system, I'd drive from client A to client B and do the documentation when I arrived at the office or back home. Under Gary's new genius rule, I could no longer do that. The very next day, I finished an installation at a major client downtown. It was a complex setup, so I had nearly 30 minutes of paperwork and internal notes to file. Under the old rules, I would have been back at the office in 15 minutes, ready for my next job. But I remembered Gary's face and his ridiculous mandate. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot of a local coffee shop right across the street from the client's building. I logged into the time tracking system, entered the client code, and put my status as documenting post-visit requirements. And then I waited. I stayed there for the entire 30 minutes, completing the documentation, exactly as the rule required, while sitting motionless in the parking lot. That first delay threw off my entire day. I got to my next client an hour late. They called the office, complaining about my tardiness. Gary was furious. He called my cell, chewing me out about the delay. I calmly explained the situation. "Gary, I was in the car on company time, but there was no billable task associated with driving. Since your memo explicitly forbids uncompensated or prep time while traveling, I had to remain stationary to complete the required documentation for the previous client." Gary sputtered, "You can't just stop working and sit in a parking lot." "Sir, I was working. I was documenting. I was clocked in and fulfilling the measurable, billable task required for the previous client. I was following your new rule to the letter." He hung up on me. So I continued this new procedure religiously. If I had to drive for 45 minutes, I'd pull over for 15 minutes before I left to document the next client's requirements, or 15 minutes after I arrived to finalize the previous job. My productivity in terms of actual site visits plummeted by about 40%. The other techs, seeing my success, quickly adopted the same strategy. Suddenly, the entire fleet of IT support cars was sitting idly in parking lots across the city, diligently completing mandatory paperwork on company time. The biggest impact was on our emergency services.